you talked about having a repertoire of voices. How do you get that? How do you build that? Is that something you take classes for, or?
I mean, kind of like I mentioned with the bad impressions, that's totally one way to come up with original characters. Erica Harlicker I was once on a panel with Erica Harlicker, and they asked, how do you come up with your character voices? And she said, I just read the script and then I try to voice match whatever voice is playing in my head. And I was like, that's the same thing I do. I've never had it phrased so eloquently, so now I just steal hers. But yeah, I recognize, I've learned recently within like the past 2 years that not everybody has a voice in their head, which is totally fine, still can be a voice actor. I was like, oh, it seems so simple to me as someone that like hears the voice and then I just try to match it. But yeah, imitating friends, I did a ton of singing as a kid. So I feel like that's how I have like such a wide range, because at least as a child, my choir teacher insisted that we always sing, she'd flip our parts. So it wasn't like, oh, you're a soprano and now you're always a soprano. It'd be like, you're an alto. This song you're a soprano, this song you're an alto, so that I had a good range. So there's that, but there's also just the biology of your voice. We all have different instruments, which is kind of why it's like, yeah, I can do that blood-curdling screamy thing pretty well, but if I scream down here, it like hurts. But other people, they can scream down here all day and it doesn't bother them, but if they have to go high, it's different. We're all beautiful and unique snowflakes, and we just have to learn our instrument. Things that I think people take for granted when creating a character that can really really help enhance the character though, is how the words are formed. Because like, for example, I'm Ragio and I'm Catherine. I feel they're in the same place vocally, they're both down here. But Catherine's, she's got harder R's, because she's just like tough and rumble tumble and whatever, And Ragio would never use a hard R like that. She's too refined, she's too elegant, and she looks down her nose, so she lifts her chin when she talks because she's looking down her nose at you. Little things like that change the way that it sounds. So even if the characters are in the same place, like pitch-wise, there's a lot you can do with how you're phrasing, it was so weird on the airplane here, I was watching the new Animaniacs, and I was listening to the theme song, I'm like, it is so strange to me that they are very clearly saying Animaniacs now instead of Animaniacs that I'm sure they were saying when I was a kid. Animaniacs. 2 different words. I just said 2 different words, but it's the same word, but it kind of changes the character of it. So it's like little things like that can make a huge difference.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hi.
So I'm a member of Local 52 in New York Film Union, and while I understand that many dubs are non-union, my question is informed from my background and the problems that stem from COVID and how we worked it out. I'm curious, with a lot of actors working from home now and having to provide equipment that originally was not required for them to have, how that was handled with them now operating equipment that they shouldn't have to have a background in, and whether they're being compensated for the use of this equipment.
That is a totally legit question that a lot of us actors have been talking about with each other in LA. One thing I will say is that actually a lot more anime is union than it used to be. With the Netflix agreement, yeah, there's I'd say, huge uptick in union animation. I'm super stoked about that, because it should be union. That being said, as far as the equipment goes, I feel like when it first started, everyone was just like, we're all in this together, we all have to make this work. I know in LA, most of the actors I knew had some level of home studio because we don't go in to do auditions in LA, which I think is different from New York. I've never lived in New York, but I have friends who worked in New York, and it sounds like, at least when they were living there, you actually still went to a studio to do your auditions, and how nice that must have been to have a director there and not direct yourself. But in LA, that never happens. So we all had varying degrees of studios, and it was just like, well, let's just upgrade this and tweak that and buy this. I didn't actually buy anything when COVID hit. I was like, okay, well, this is what I have. Does it work? Great. But now that we're in this weird place of like, we could go into studios now because people are vaccinated, and it's like, okay, we've figured out protocols. And if people want to go into studios, why do they have to use their home equipment and be their own engineers? And are the studios taking advantage of us, or are we pushing things that, you know, we don't want any actors to feel like they have to go into a studio if they don't want to either, which was part of the thing early on, is we didn't want to give studios a reason to pressure actors who didn't want to go in to have to go in, which is why we would kind of avoided charging for equipment and stuff. But I think we'll probably start to see some talks from the union on that coming forth now that we're starting to head out of lockdown land and back into studio land. I'm not a member, well, I am a member of SAG, but I'm not like a board member of SAG. I have no say, that's just me assuming things. But it definitely is something that actors in LA are talking about.
Thank you.
Cool, thanks. Yes.
Hello. So I take singing as a form of vocal therapy, and I've also been wondering about how to incorporate that into a voice acting career. Can you incorporate that in your demo, or would you put that as something separate? Some
actors put a singing clip on their demo. If you've got a really great singing voice, my friend Rochelle Hager, who's Susie in Little Witch Academia, so there's a person she is. She's an incredible singer. She has a singing clip on her demo. Me, I sing, I mean, like I did the Cells at Work stuff, but I don't think of myself as being like, oh yeah, I could compete with the best of the professional Broadway people, so I do not have a singing clip on my demo. But I have thought of making a separate singing demo for character singing, because I do in-character singing. I just haven't gotten around to that. So the answer is, you could go either way, whatever you feel like doing. If you think you've got enough vocal range, like singing-wise, that you would want to do a bunch of characters, then I would put that on a separate demo. If you just want to show people, oh, I can sing also, I would just put that on your character demo.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Hi. So this is kind of an oddball left field question. It's not necessarily a voice actor. It's more, I got me and a group of friends that are trying to do an amateur project, YouTube-wise, and mentioned directing YouTube inside of it. Don't know if you can answer this question necessarily, but I guess what pitfalls would you find there that you would try and easily avoid, or I guess suggestions to make a video interesting, like
for YouTube?
Yeah, like something like that, or like an animation project. We're gonna try and do an animation project as a group kind of thing, and we're like looking at things like time of video or something like that kind of thing.
I actually can't speak too much to that because I directed the dub for Pokemon Twilight Wings, but the animation was done by Pokemon Company. The distribution was all done, the scripting, everything was done by Pokemon Company. I just held auditions for the characters and then directed the characters that were cast. So I don't know that much about like how to get YouTube to pay attention, you know, the YouTube algorithm or any of that, unfortunately.
Well, it's more like maybe just like pay attention, like things to pay attention to, like just to be careful of, or just, I don't know. It's a left ball question, didn't know.
No, I appreciate you asking it. I just wish I had a better answer because I don't have that much from the production side of animation. Until you include voice actors, I'm basically clueless aside from some college.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, sorry.
It's okay.
No worries.
I have returned with another question.
Yes.
So I am trying to go ahead and develop my voice acting resume, and I just wanted to know, because I'm making my own original content audio drama, and I was just wondering if I do voices in that, would people kind of look down upon it, like when I cast myself as characters in that, or would they kind of like see that as like, I'm doing an extra step and like actually making my own stuff?
Okay.
I would say some people are probably gonna be like, oh, he cast himself, because some people just have that opinion. But as far as professionals go, no, go ahead, cast yourself. It's your project, you're making it, you're putting in all the effort, by all means cast yourself. When I was like early on in my career and doing, audio dramas and stuff, I produced audio dramas and I absolutely cast myself, because whatever, if I'm putting in the work, I want to do the fun part too. So yeah, it's experience you get, and you should have that. your decision. If you want to cast yourself as the, producer of this project, then you have that right. And I don't think, again, I can't control how the world views things, but overall the professional world is not going to be like, oh, this guy.
So it's like just as valid.
Yeah, it's just as valid.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
What sort of advice would you give in terms of making your own home studio, or at least have a certain level of something to work with? I just know that the hardest part is more just having the right space.
Yep, the space is the hardest part. It's so funny because like when COVID hit, I had so many like friends being like, look at my studio bricks. Isn't it beautiful? I've got LED lighting. It's amazing. And I'm like, look at my closet with bedding foam. It's dirty and none of the foam matches colors and some of it's brown. It's beautiful. And it doesn't matter because that got the work done just as well as the studio bricks did, But yeah, the trick is finding a quiet place. You don't want it. I'm not an engineer, so sometimes they hear things I don't hear where they're like, that sounds boxy. And I'm like, that sounds fine to me. I don't know what you're talking about. So you want to try and find a place that's not too enclosed, because then you might get something that sounds boxy, as they say. But you need a place that doesn't have reflections either. That's why people put the foam down. The foam is not to cut out outside sound. Putting down foam is not going to stop people from hearing your neighbors or footsteps or loud bass music or any of that. It's just so that the reflections off the walls, you don't sound like you're in a room, because we're trying to avoid that. That being said, so they have all these fancy soundproof foams, and like I said, I have like bedding a crate foam that I've been using for 10 years, and it's fine, it does the job. As far as mics go, there's so much, it depends on a lot of things. Some studios are like, you have to have a whatever $1,000 Neumann mic, and that's the only way that you'll be able to work professionally. And I'm like, okay, well, I do not have a Neumann or whatever the other ones are. I have a Studio Projects condenser microphone. It does the job. You can find a million threads online talking about different mics. So it's kind of tricky. It depends on who you want to work with. A lot of studios will tell you at least if what you're doing like is okay or not. Like they'll make you do a test and they'll say this setup won't work. And nowadays they'll be like, you have to come in. But they used to be like, you'll have to get a different preamp or mic or room or whatever it is that they needed. But yeah, I'm not the most tech savvy person. I'm very much like, people say this works, so I did that. And that's my setup basically. But yeah, don't get pressured into spending more money than you need to is the one thing I would say, because I feel like a lot of people, for the gram, they have their super fancy studios with their LED lighting and everything, and it's not necessary to do the job.
Thank you.
Cool.
Howdy, thank you for coming by. I'm yet another fledgling VA.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm glad there's a lot of us here.
Me
But
too.
I was curious how you deal with performance anxiety. If there's like specific ways for coping with that, how you can take that awful feeling in your gut and basically channel that into making a more believable, authentic performance. Like just push past it like it's not even there.
Classes for me. It's basically exposure therapy. The one nice thing is that, when you're doing voiceover, at most you're in front of maybe 10 other people, and that's if you're like doing something big, and so there's a director and a writer and a talent coordinator and like 5 producers and whatever.
Yeah.
So it's nice because you don't ever have to deal with like the big performance anxiety where it's like, oh, that's a huge crowd of people and my knees are shaking and my stomach's quavering and I'm gonna be sick, but I'm gonna put that aside. If you couldn't tell from that description, I've absolutely felt that feeling. Part of it is one of the other things I do when I do feel that way is, aside from the exposure therapy that's gotten me used to doing it by just being behind the mic and being behind the glass, is I'm an actress. I'll just act like it's not bothering me until I get back in my car, and then I can have a breakdown. Once I'm back in my car, then I can just go, But yeah, so I'll just walk into the studio like, hey, hi, yeah. I'm totally not suffering from imposter syndrome in any way, shape, or form right now. I belong here, and I'm here to do the work that I do all the time, and am totally fine and good at it.
That
Thank
is
you.
such a mood. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hi.
I was interested in what was your first big breakout role in the industry in terms of voiceover, and what advice do you have for people who are novices or up and coming to try to get their first big role in the industry and actually jumpstart their career?
Well, the thing is, I was guilty of it too, is you always think if there's a breakout role, that's the role that made my career. But it doesn't really work like that. It's more because that would be if there was a big brick wall and you just bashed through it hello world, here I am. But it's really more taking this teeny chisel and this teeny hammer and going tunk, 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 for decades. Tink, 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 tink against this wall, and you're oh, I think I can see a little light on the other side. Ooh, 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 oh, I got this big video game roll. Boom, there goes a little chunk, and you can see a little bit more. I mean, I've been doing voiceover now for, oh my gosh, sorry. I just thought about it, and it made me a little freaked out. I want to say I've been doing voiceover for almost 20 years. Pursuing it as a teen and doing all that stuff online where nobody had ever heard of me, to where I am now sitting here at Otakon. And there are definitely some people that I booked Kasumi in Persona 5 Royal, and people were I have no idea who that is. I've never heard of her before. And it's well, there's, a decade of work that you could, okay, no, that's fine. So is that my breakout role, or is my breakout role Valentine and Skullgirls, because that was a popular thing fairly early on in my career, but it wasn't the earliest thing I did, or you know what I mean? It's just sort of a gradual process. There are people who have absolutely had a breakout role where it's I had never done anything and then I was the lead in this. But that's not how it works for 99% of us, I'd say.
So I'm interested even in how do you get those smaller roles just kind of build up almost what's the process?
I mean, I was in that Genesis Avalon podcast, for example. I was yeah, and then Chris Hackney was also in the Genesis Avalon podcast with me, and we knew each other, and we did classes together in LA, and then we, maybe he heard from maybe he got an audition and there was a female character, and he was oh, by the way, this is all hypothetical, this didn't technically happen, but he was oh, Laura Post would be perfect for that role. So he emailed the casting director and was hey, I don't know if you're accepting referrals, but I have a friend who would be perfect for that role for the females if you're, interested in her name. And that casting director was yeah. And then sends me the audition, and I audition and I book it. It's all these little things.
It's a connection thing.
There is definitely, connections play a part. It's not all of it. Some people focus on it too much, but that's why I always suggest taking classes, because you don't network with the people, like I said with Chris. Chris and I were coming up at the same time. Me and Lucian Dodge and Erica Mendez, we were all coming up at the same time. It wasn't I was trying to be, these were just people I made friends with because we were all at the same point in our careers, all actors, and now we're all working, which is great. So in that way, networking plays a part. But also it's just the hustle, getting your voice out there. You never know when someone's gonna hear oh man, I heard you in that podcast and I happened to be casting this thing. I did this video game called Firefall, and in it I did a Brazilian accent, and then some audition went out where the person was looking for a Brazilian accent, and I had 5 friends be Laura, they're looking for a Brazilian accent, and I auditioned for it, and I didn't book it. But then that casting director was I really liked your audition though, the acting was great. So he kept sending me more auditions. And then later through him, I booked Queen Ashara in World of Warcraft. So it's little things like that. It just happened that way. And that first game where I did the Brazilian accent, I got from Craigslist. So it's just chipping away at that wall with every way you possibly can.
That's amazing. Thank you so much.
advice do you have for kids and teenagers who want to get into the industry?
Take classes. I know it's like the same for everybody, but when I started, I was a teen. And I remember I took a class, I was in Chicago. I was taking classes with a place called Sound Advice there in Chicago. And the teacher there was like, this is great that you're a teen, because there's not a lot of teens that are doing this, so agents are like, ooh, an actual teen. When they're looking for actual teens, I have one. Isn't that great? So again, another tool in your toolkit, as long as you are a kid or teen. Once you become adult, that tool just disappears. You know, what's important is that you're a solid actor, and you have a demo reel you can send to agents, and yeah, so getting your voice in front of people, that's the main reason I recommend classes, is because it gets your voice in front of the people that need to hear your voice to cast you. But you can also do podcasts or animations, indie games, all those sorts of things. Get your voice in front of people. Someone might hear something that they like and you'll be discovered. So that, yeah, it's just getting yourself out there.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Hi, I know for like original voices, whether or not like all the voice actors come together and do like record together, or if they record separately. I was wondering if it's the same thing for like dubbing, and like which one you prefer as a voice actor or as a director.
I've never had to direct ensemble recording, is when everybody records together, because I've only directed anime, which is never recorded ensemble. So it's because you're dubbing the picture, it just doesn't make sense to have everybody sit. You can't do lip sync wild like that, so it doesn't make financial sense to have everybody sit in the room while each person dubs their singular line. But for original animation, it does make sense because you can record everybody in the room, so you're paying everybody the same amount you'd be paying them anyway, but all the actors can bounce off of each other. One thing people don't always realize about those sessions though, is we're bouncing off of each other and we're waiting the fraction of a second because they need to edit it all together. If you actually step on someone's line, that line gets ruined because they can't edit it in any way because you talked at the same time as the other actor. It came through 2 mics. So even when I did like Justice League Action, which was a prelay animation, we recorded ensemble. It was amazing, the time of my life. But anytime we talked, you know, it would be like, I've been here before. Have you now? There's just the tiniest little break so that the engineer or the sound editor or whoever they're doing, when they're doing the actual like final cut, they can move things around if they need to. It might not sound that way in the final mix, but we all take that tiny fraction of a break called an edit point so that they can edit. My favorite way to work is ensemble, but I understand why we have to be on our own for anime because it just doesn't make sense logistically.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Back again for another question. It seems like even with so many people recording from home, it still really is important to kind of be where the roles are. And so I was just wondering if the different kind of locations had different kind of cultures that predisposed them to one type of media or another. Like if one city was better for video games or for anime or for Western animation, stuff like that.
Video games, you basically want to be, well, Texas has some video games too. I was gonna say you basically want to be in LA. If you want to do American cartoons, LA or New York. If you want to do anime, LA, New York, or Dallas. If you want to do video games, you'd be in San Francisco, LA, Washington, Atlanta, Dallas, I think. I don't know where they all are for sure. I haven't, like I mentioned earlier, like I've only lived in Chicago and LA. I've visited Dallas, but I can't speak to the culture there because I was there for like 3 days. But it does help to be where the work is in general. I'm glad that we're opening up a little bit more because we can get more diverse casts just by being able to be like, oh yeah, this person is, you know, in Arkansas, does that matter? No, as long as they have good internet, great. It was nice for me on Twilight Wings because I was really looking for like some very specific voice types. So I had people from Ohio and Iowa and all over the place reading for me on Twilight Wings. But if you want to make a career out of it, I still would suggest moving. Just maybe not right now. This is not the greatest time to be moving. But I think your ultimate goal end goal should be to move somewhere where the work is, whether that's Texas or New York or LA.
Thank you again so much.
No, thank you. Hey, you did it.
So I guess I consider myself a novice voice actor. It's something I'm passionate about, something I try to pursue. In the line of work that I currently do, which is more online fan-based content, I find myself doing a lot of my own post-production. So I'll be cleaning, manipulating, pacing audio, adding effects, doing stuff like that. I know that in terms of I guess more real world stereotypical acting, how much of that, if any, is expected or I guess normal in industry?
Basically none of that will you have to do for yourself. Definitely when you do auditions for projects, you definitely would never put a vocal effect on yourself. I know that you're not doing it for an audition. I could tell from your description, but I'm just throwing that out there because I've seen it on sides where I'm like, do people actually do that? Why would they? Because if you're doing a monster or something, it's going to be adjusted and affected. They're going to put effects on it and filters and all sorts of stuff. But as an actor, generally speaking, even with the remote recording age, they want your dirty audition, your dirty files, so that the engineer can put every talent's file through the same filters and keep everything as uniform as possible. I know what you're talking about because I know how to do all those things too from my early days acting, where it was please noise reduce your files, everything down to here and everything adjusted to here, and I get you. But fortunately, we don't have to do any of that for ourselves when you're working in working on projects that have the luxury of a sound engineer and a sound designer. They'll do a lot of the creature effects and stuff. So if you're doing, I don't know, something for League and it's a big monstrous thing, you give the performance and then the sound designer does all the tweaks to make it sound super cool. Yeah, so that help?
That's great, thank you.
And ladies and gentlemen, that was our last question of the afternoon. Thank you guys.
Thank you all for coming. I'm really glad we got some cool stuff done. So thanks.
Apologies I did have to turn down a couple of people because we did cap the line with that young lady back there. So apologies that we couldn't get your questions out.
Yeah, sorry. Thank you.